Donald Trump is shutting down aluminum production in Canada, and Mark Carney and his team are furious because they're now begging in the EU for more deals as they're setting taxpayer dollars on fire just to keep those industries afloat. But Canadians should actually be thanking Donald Trump because what this has done is showed us how bad our government has been in investing in the wrong industries and being so lazy about Canada's development. And the recession just got worse today with even more job losses announced in Canada. But that's not the only thing Canadians should be thanking Trump for. Trump's new Tough on Crime initiative is spreading into Canada, and politicians are finally getting serious. We just had a state of emergency announced in a Canadian city. That never would have happened unless the rhetoric had been changing. It's been crazy to see all of this. We also have a bunch of updates on a few stories that I hadn't talked about previously, but I think you guys will probably be interested in. And of course, we got to feature some foreign entrepreneurs at the end of the video. But one of the stories I want to talk about, I think governments need to pay attention to because this could be setting an interesting trend or precedent for what we might see moving forward. There's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
Nearly all of Canada's aluminum is produced in Quebec and subject to damaging U.S. tariffs. So the federal government is trying to soften the blow.
It's that vision of a new industrial era that we're putting into place today.
Industry Minister Melanie Joly assured the sector it will receive its share of a $5 billion relief fund.
At the end of the day, we will be able to work on us and work on our own market.
She did not provide an exact number, but says it will be in the hundreds of millions.
We ship 56,000 tons per week of aluminium to the U.S. We lost tremendous amounts of money.
On Friday.
Yes, and this is private industry losing tremendous amounts of money, like he just said. And the best thing the Canadian government can do is say, oh, we're resetting the industry of Canada. What we're going to do is we're going to keep spending government money on these industries just to keep them afloat. But we'll get into what's happening with their deals with Europe after this video.
Prime Minister Mark Carney rolled out a tariff relief package.
We will build Canada strong.
Monday's announcement in Montreal is a drilling down of those measures, including the $5 billion Strategic Response Fund to help affected sectors, a Buy Canadian policy to ensure the federal government purchases domestically, immediate liquidity relief with $5 million in loans to small and medium businesses, and a regional tariff response initiative worth $1 billion over 3 years. But there's no plan to match the Trump administration's tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum.
So a couple important things with those announcements there. They have 3-year plans, 5-year plans, a ton of stuff around this. Does that mean that you're thinking you will never get a deal with the US? Does that mean that you're thinking that these are going to be permanent and there's no way to fix that? Because if that's the case, you should probably let Canadians know that you're planning that you are not going to get a deal.
The US hit both sectors with 50% duties back in June, but Ottawa's counter tariffs are only 25%.
We need to tariff all American steel coming into Canada that we can produce. So why did they get a free pass?
Joly says Canada is still focused on its immediate goal of removing the tariffs. But the series of support measures are another sign the government is bracing for the long-term impacts of a protracted trade war.
See, the long-term impacts of a protracted trade war. So they're not going to say it because Canadians would obviously freak out. And Carney's supposed to be the Trump whisperer. But we know this is, again, why we have to thank Donald Trump, because Canada's economy was basically reliant on the United States. You know, the economy that we don't need, that we're going to be elbows up against. And it was just so eye-opening how hard it was going to be for Canada to find other markets, because we already saw this article here that Europe sees a flood. Keep in mind of the wording here, okay? Europe sees a flood of Canadian aluminum as U.S. tariffs bite. The quick takeaways here before we get to the end of the article, which has a funny line. Aluminum producers in Quebec are sending more of the metal to Europe as U.S. tariffs make shipments more expensive for American customers. Okay. The U.S. market accounted for 78% of aluminum exports from Quebec in the second quarter versus 95%. So they worded it kind of weird. Down from 95% in the first quarter, while Europe's share rose to 18% from 0.2%. So you wonder, like, how did they absorb that much aluminum? Europe has offered a buffer against the loss-making U.S. market for Canadian producers with companies such as Alcoa and Aluminerie Alouette, diverting shipments to Europe due to the tariffs. Now, here's the thing. How have these businesses been staying afloat? Well, we now know they're getting hundreds of billions in government subsidies just to stay afloat. So now you go, oh, Canada is sending government subsidized products to Europe. We're capturing the market, but we're sending government subsidized products undercutting their local markets. Now they have people in Europe warning, well, Canada might be as bad as China, flooding the market with cheap aluminum. You have to wonder, how much profit are they actually making sending this discounted aluminum to Europe? My interest is whether or not this is a paradigm shift in how the trade is going to flow or just a short-term effect. The concern is actually that it's going to be Chinese material being diverted into Europe, but in fact, maybe it's Canadian materials. They're getting compared now to Chinese product dumping, which is not good. Canada's poor economic performance has been happening for a decade. Nobody wanted to call it out. Everybody wanted to be Team Trudeau. We had all of the media propping it up, even though we used quantitative peopling to keep Canada's entire economy afloat. We weren't actually majorly producing. So we have this article here, weak within and shaken by tariffs. Canada needs a new economic and fiscal model. Again, the big takeaway is at the end of the article. The U.S. tariff threat deprives us of comparable timeline, but expedited ways must be found to engage experts and to consult with the public. Had former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, again, this has been happening for a long time, followed through on its promise to establish a productivity commission and had the review of corporation taxation promised in the 2025 Liberal election platform been established, we would have been better prepared. It's time to reject complacency, regain inventiveness, which Canada is not inventing anything right now, and the reputation for producing goods and services of high quality and competitive pricing throughout the new trading world, which means stop focusing on immigration and taxpayer spending for growth. They keep talking about how, oh, we're going to fix Canada. We're going to shut down the interprovincial trade barriers because the only problem to Canada's economy and trade, of course, is Donald Trump. And again, this is why Canadians need to say, thank you, Donald Trump, because this whole video says chefs want this Canadian beef, but trade rules means it's easier to get it from Australia. So two provinces that are basically beside each other, that's what this video is about, can't deal with each other's beef because of federal and provincial regulations. Yes, our own government is stopping our own companies from doing business with each other inside of Canada. Can't play this video because they have a copyrighted song for like the entire thing. But this is why I want Pierre to get more serious on cutting immigration and actually investing in things that matter. As we saw, PP calls for broader tax cuts to ease housing crisis. That's not a big enough change that's actually going to help. The biggest thing, of course, is going to be slashing immigration. She's kind of talking about now, but I'd like to get him more serious on it because we need way more investments in other areas that's not just real estate. The focus on real estate takes money out of the private industry, which needs more investment. And what happens is when you're already taking private money out of the market so that it's investing in real estate, and then you continue to offer tens of billions of dollars in incentives, and then there's no demand. We get stories like this. And guess what? Funny enough, America is actually winning based on this announcement because of Canada's misinvestment. Have you liked the video yet? We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you like what we talk about here, feel free to subscribe. Welcome to all the new subscribers and the channel members. Let's get back to it.
Carney began producing the Bright Drop delivery van in 2022, but that new era in EV production in Canada has now turned to new disappointments for those who make the vehicle.
And when we do come back to work, it's only going to be one shift.
Carney went on shutdown this past spring with sales of the Bright Drop not as robust as expected. Unifor Local 88, which represents workers at the plant, says it has been informed by GM the plant will reopen mid-November with just 400 people. That's down from 1,050 and significantly less than the 600 union officials expected would be back.
So that's what, 650 people, jobs lost overnight. And for the community that's in, that is a staggering number of jobs, like pretty insane.
Be layoffs. We've gone through the company right now to talk about retirement incentives. Anybody who may want to quit, give them some money and hopefully narrow our numbers down. But it's going to be tough on hundreds of people.
In a written response to CTV News, GM says this is not related to tariffs. We are taking proactive, strategic steps to ensure our operations remain aligned with real-time demand.
I think it's certainly a continuation.
So this is why I wanted to show this, because we want to blame Donald Trump for everything. It's so easy to pass the buck. But in fact, This was a misinvestment by the government to try and encourage all of this EV production and try and make all these companies force them to adopt all of the EV mandates. So these companies are going, okay, I guess we'll focus our production on that. But then what's happened is there's no demand. So the Canadian government has chosen to, and guys, the amount of incentives they've offered, it's tens of billions of dollars just for EVs.
Of the reason why the layoff happened in the first place of slower sales, but there's a lot of things that are going on, certainly south of the border, that don't help the situation. I know that there's cancellations of shifts at their Detroit plant as well, so this is not just an Ingersoll item, it's an overall economic situation.
And there's just not that much EV demand in North America.
News coming as the federal government announces it's delaying a plan to force automakers to hit minimum sales levels for EVs. GM says it welcomes this first step to align regulations to consumer demand. Adding insult to injury, this brand new battery plant built on site at Carney specifically to produce batteries for the BrightDrop vehicles will sit idle for the foreseeable future, with batteries to equip the vehicles coming from south of the border, according to Unifor.
Hundreds of jobs lost, all because the Canadian government was just pushing the wrong ideology. But it's been really interesting to see the comparison between the US and Canada jobs numbers and how a lot of the news has been trying to spin that against Trump. But let's get into it.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics will release a major revision to the jobs numbers. Some believe the new numbers will show the jobs slowdown began much earlier under President Biden. John Lonsky joins me. John, were these numbers politically manipulated? What do you think?
Well, I don't think so. To be honest with you, Stuart, if they were politically manipulated, why not have lower than expected readings on payrolls pop up, say, 9 to 12 months before the election, so that you would get Federal Reserve rate cuts that would help assure that the economy is growing rapidly enough to boost the likelihood of Biden's being reelected or whoever was the Democratic Party standard bearer.
There's been a lot of speculation about the political manipulation of the numbers, but the fact is the time period, 9 months of the time period that they're adjusting, was under Joe Biden as president. So it's going to be really hard for them to be like, oh, all of these job losses are due to Trump. But Trump actually scored another win today, which I actually, again, think will bleed over to Canada eventually. Let's check this out.
Lauren, what are we talking about?
The mass firings of federal workers. Yep, a federal appeals court ruling 2-1 that 19 states and Washington, D.C. cannot pursue a legal challenge to the federal mass firings of about 25,000 workers who had less than a year experience. The court says, look, the states lacked legal standing to sue and they cannot demonstrate harm. The states say, well, workers needed 30 to 60 days notice. They didn't get it. And the states had to handle more unemployment claims. But in the end, the court says the federal government is in charge of who the federal government employs.
So while Canada is doubling down on wasting taxpayer dollars with government spending, we're seeing Trump is laying off public sector employees. And allegedly, Canada has that coming. And again, a lot of it has to do with Trump shaking things up. But a big thing that Americans should learn from, this is the same thing that we are dealing with in Canada right now. This is what all of the politicians in Canada are talking about. And this program's actually been almost as abused in the US as it has been in Canada. People don't understand the scale of the H-1B scam. There are some companies where literally every hire is an Indian visa holder. They actually want you to believe an entire company's worth of jobs can't be staffed by Americans. Same thing happening in Canada. Oh, we just can't find any employees as the unemployment continues to go up. And then the sectors that you guys in the US, it's the same sectors that we were dealing with here. Banks, telecom firms were the biggest users of H-1B middlemen. New H-1B workers hired between May 2020 and 2024. All of these red dots are from H-1B contractors hired through middlemen. So basically hiring through these immigration services and these consultants. And it's all run through India. And it's just been a way to import cheap Indian labor into the countries, undercut the job market. It would be good for Americans to focus on shutting down that program. If you're going to get all the deportations done, you may as well cut down the semi-legal. And I call it semi-legal because they're not really following the rules of the law. But we're seeing generally Trump's economic plans are working in the US.
Thanks, Caroline. Following up on Ed, now that we have these revised jobs numbers, is the president concerned at all that price spikes, stemming from his tariffs through the end of the year might actually be driving the country towards a depression or a recession. What I'm asking is he committed to these policies now that we know how faulty the jobs data was?
Depression is such a major jump.
President is committed to his policies because his policies are working, Christian. And there have been a lot of people fear-mongering about inflation in this room, but it just has not come to fruition. On a monthly basis, CPI inflation has now come in at or below the market's expectation for 6 consecutive months, every month that President Trump has been in office. Overall, inflation has run at a 1.9% average pace in the president's first 6 months in office. I would have told all of you that in January, you would not have believed me, but those are the facts and those are the numbers. And we all
Yeah, everybody's been freaking out. Oh no, this should be insane inflation. So far, it's not materialized. We've got some big inflation numbers coming in the next few days that will be important to pay attention to. But shifting gears here, this is the other thing. So again, with Trump's policies working, we are shifting gears to his other policy of the tough on crime. And here is that update.
All right, let's bring in Chris Becker now, former FBI Assistant Director. He's also former chair of the North Carolina Crime Commission. Chris, thanks for being here today. Our hearts break for this girl and her family. And you see the 14 mugshots. We've got them up here in the studio. 14 mugshots, over a decade of arrests. I mean, his rap sheet lengthy. Even his mother questioned why the heck anybody was letting him walk freely. Why was he out on the streets, on that train, and able to walk freely and carry out this heinous murder?
Martha, incredibly tragic and entirely preventable.
It's still so frustrating that she came from a war-torn country for safety, and this is what she had to deal with in the U.S.
That happened here in Charlotte, where I reside. I mean, this is a failure of the system, and the people who promote these soft-on-crime policies. We're a blue city, and these soft-on-crime policies have been going on since around 2020 or so, and it is reflected in their homicide rate, which has doubled since 2020. To about 110, 111 homicides in 2024. This guy should never have been out on the street. He had been, his mother had tried, as you mentioned, tried to have him involuntarily committed and succeeded. And as did the public defender that defended him and said, this guy's off, he shouldn't be on the streets. And yet some judge here, an elected judge, kicked him loose and put him right back out on the street.
So that's the important part that I wanted to cover there. The judges need to have some level of accountability, and I've said this about the Canadian judges because as the left-wing ideology of the soft on crime, letting criminals get away with whatever they want, somehow it's infected all of the judges in Canada and in the US, and they're so soft on crime that it's encouraging, you're basically encouraging these people to do this. And you hear, he had 14 arrests. You hear about 30 arrests, 40 arrests, insane amounts, and the judges go, nope, you get to walk, he gets to be on the streets. And this is why we got a state of emergency declared in Canada, and he calls out Canadian judges directly, and the only reason he's doing that is because we are seeing these trends bleed over from the US. It always starts in the US and makes its way to Canada.
But we, the city of Barrie, do not have control over this emergency. The federally appointed judges are superseding everyday bylaws. The cities have enacted to create and maintain order. The Barrie Police Department operates as an arm's-length police service overseeing law enforcement, or the lack thereof, being told by the justice system that it's a waste of time to enforce drug possession or drug use laws. This because often those same judges just mentioned throw the cases out and warn the prosecutors to steer away from such charges. While I support the county's plan to deliver new space and the Heart Hub, we have all simply run out of time.
Yep, run out of time, run out of patience, and again, we need some sort of legal accountability for the judges who caused these problems and continue to essentially encourage crime. But we did have this update here. I wanted to talk about this, and we got Carolyn Levitt talking about the new Epstein letter updates where they're kind of, the media is going nuts because a new letter was found with Donald Trump's signature. I do find the timing of this suspicious, a little bit funny that now, as his economic programs seem to be working, his tough on crime seems to be working, the letter comes out. Very interesting.
And the Epstein files are back in the news because a lot of Americans feel that that Jeffrey Epstein's victims never got justice. Does the president care about these victims? Do you think he can does he want to deliver more justice for them, and is he willing to meet with them?
The president cares about victims of all crimes, and that's why Republicans in the Trump Department of Justice have done more in terms of transparency when it comes to the Epstein case than any prior administration. And why are the Democrats all of a sudden caring about this? It's because they are desperately trying to concoct a hoax to smear the president of the United States. We have seen this time and time again. Ro Khanna and all of these other Democrats, they could have cared about those victims 4 years ago.
Yeah, so that's the kind of important takeaway here. You know, they're calling it a hoax, and maybe it is. Who knows what's going on? I think all of the files should obviously be released. That being said, you know, they did lose a lot of credibility when you have the Russian dossier and all of these things, which were proven hoaxes. The Epstein stuff's not new. This has been happening for 20 years. The left-wing media has known about this for 20 years. If any of these major mainstream media corporations wanted to take the time to call this out, yes, they have more documents than ever. This has been a well-known thing. Bill Clinton's name is all over this stuff. So many left-wing people, you know, Democrats are all over this. Republicans too. To be honest, it's kind of across the board. That's why I think we should just kind of release the files and get to the bottom of what happened. I think that's probably important. But the fact remains, the media only cares now because they're trying to take out Trump. They knew about this before.
When Joe Biden was in office, they could have pushed for transparency then. Unfortunately, the Democrats are using victims as political pawns to try to smear and to push a hoax against the president of the United States. Go ahead.
About the Epstein case, would the White House support a professional handwriting expert review of the document released yesterday to prove that it's not the president's signature?
Sure, we would support that. And in fact, I have already seen many forensic analysts of signatures coming out. I believe it was the Daily Signal that published a piece with 3 separate signature analysts who said that this absolutely was not the president's authentic signature.
So it'll be really interesting to see how this story develops. Obviously, there's more documents that need to come out. The public needs to learn more. But speaking of left-wing compromised governments, and the reason I say that is because this government has been accused of being a communist regime. We have these insane uprisings. What's happening in Nepal? I think this is actually kind of important to pay attention to because we've seen a lot of unrest in other countries, especially in the West. So it was wild to see that it got to this level.
We are following developments in Nepal. Unrest is escalating in the South Asian country. This is Nepal's parliament building set on fire. Protesters there, they say the government is corrupt, and people are also angry about what we told you about yesterday, a recent social media ban in the country. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Chanel Call for the latest in all of this. Chanel,
So my favorite part about all of the, you know, left-wing news coverage, to be honest, I haven't seen that much right-wing news coverage of this. They keep saying it's about a social media ban. No, it's not about a social media ban. It's about government corruption. So basically, the government was corrupt. They said, oh, you guys are stealing. You're completely compromised, all of this other stuff. And they were calling them out on social media. And then the ban happened. And then they were like, oh, well, we got to take out our corrupt communist government. That's what they had the problem with.
I understand Nepal's prime minister has now resigned. Can you tell us more about that?
That's right. We've been closely watching this story, Mugo, since yesterday, and the situation in Nepal intensifying today. The country's Prime Minister KP Sharma Ali resigning after clashes between protesters and police continued overnight. The government also now notably rolling back that social media ban that sparked those deadly protests. But those changes, they don't appear to have a big effect on the demonstrators and what they're trying to do here. You know, we saw...
Oh, so it turns out it wasn't the social media ban.
Tens of thousands of protesters staying on the streets, Mugo. They were seen blocking roads. They were seen storming government buildings and then setting them on fire, including, of course, Nepal's parliament building, which we just saw on our screens a moment ago. Let's show you that video again if we can, control room. The Prime Minister's house, Mugo, was absolutely ransacked. It was set on fire. And again, at least 9...
Yeah, there was a bunch of clips that were going around Twitter of all of the personal houses of the politicians. Basically, so many of them were raided. They were run down in the streets. It was crazy that this level of action happened. And again, what is actually stemming this government is a communist government. They've been controlling everything. They've been hurting the futures of the younger generations. And so they've been calling this a Gen Z protest. And we're seeing in the West, because of mass immigration and limiting of opportunities, all these things, the younger generations are getting fed up. So worth noting.
19 people have been killed so far in these protests. This, of course, has now resulted in serious political turmoil in the country. This, Mugo, is the worst unrest that this country has seen in decades. Wow. Now, Nepal's main international gateway, Kathmandu Airport, that also has been shut down because some of these protests have now been spreading to other neighboring cities. The demonstrations, we should note, have been largely driven by young people in the country, Mugo. These young people are saying, look, we are frustrated with a lack of action to tackle corruption in the country. They also say that they want the country's leaders to do more to create more economic opportunities for them in the years ahead.
Now talking about foreign entrepreneurs, just showing Canadians how to do business. So here we have our quick business lesson of the day.
And police are asking for the public's help to identify these 4 men involved in a bold theft at a Huntsville Home Depot. This was on September 2nd. They say the suspects filled carts with power tools and other items worth about $8,000 before walking out of the store without paying. All 4 are described as South Asian men in their 20s and 30s.
All 4 are described as South Asian men in their 20s and 30s. Those are the foreign entrepreneurs that Canada needs the most. With today's updates, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Canada's economy is able to hang in with trying to find these other markets. I think what it's going to prove, as the accusations heat up of Canada dumping the material, that they're going to need to get a deal done with the US. Canadians are going to need to thank Trump for our politicians finally acknowledging immigration problems and the crime problems. All of these things were not mentioned for 10 years. They've been a problem for a long time. So let's stop importing these foreign entrepreneurs, even though they do such good business, and let's get a deal done with the United States and build a massive economic zone and avoid the protests that they got going on in Nepal. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it through YouTube. And honestly, thank you and have a great rest of your day.